Hey folks, welcome to Unqualified, the fantasy football podcast that's been overpromising and underdelivering since 2017. I'm your producer, Rob Diesendorf, here with co-hosts Sean Brady and Scott Johnson, two fantasy football rivals that have been sabotaging each other for years. They decided to come together to help you. I'm laughing during the
What are you laughing at?
I don't know.
You're going to get some sleep.
I've been editing 3 podcasts a week.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Well, how are you guys doing?
Great. Not as sleep deprived as you, though.
Oh, yeah. I'm doing pretty well over here, actually. Just been waiting patiently for this pod to start. It's been a long time.
Sean, you're actually on vacation right now, right? Where are you?
I'm on vacation. I'm up in Maine, Bar Harbor, Maine, putting in the hours of hard work while on vacation with these guys, these two knuckleheads.
Chowing down on some lobsters.
He's a knucklehead, Kenny. Kim Jong-il is a knucklehead.
Can I give you a quick hot take on lobster?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Super
Overpriced?
underrated food. It's way overpriced, don't get me wrong, but it is worth every penny. Absolutely delicious.
Yeah, is it better than the Montauk off the highway lobster roll place we went to?
Yes, 100% better. Yes.
Fresher.
We went to a place a couple times this week, actually. We went there twice. And this place, you can literally see... I mean, if you're a lobster, it's probably the worst place on earth. But for humans, it's great. You can just see this guy just absolutely slaughtering lobsters all day, boiling them. They look delicious coming out of the pots, bright red. Oh, my God, they're so good.
Jeez. You sound like you're...
I've heard that you can hear the lobsters screaming in the pot. Is that true?
That is... Okay, here's another thing for you. That's actually not true. I'm pretty sure it's just steam coming out.
Yeah, I think that's fake, too.
Yeah. I knew that. I thought it'd be a good conversation starter.
Also, there's very quote unquote humane ways of killing lobsters, and it doesn't involve just putting them in live into a pot of steaming hot water. So that's not the best way to do it.
Yeah,
apparently.
why do they cook them live?
I don't know. That's that's messed up. I don't. You're not supposed.
If you're gonna cook your own, do it right. Be a man.
Do it right. Come on.
Get it done and then boil.
Yeah.
Do it like they do it in Maine, bro. Is that too far? Jeez. All right. Too much.
All right,
bro.
So let's talk about let's talk about this episode. What's today's episode about?
All right. So this episode is about the AFC North. So the teams here, in order that we're going to be talking about them, are the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Baltimore Ravens, the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Cleveland Browns. We're going to be talking about each position and each team, our hot takes on them, on the each individual position, where we think those teams are going to land in the division as well.
Yeah, and this division is very up and down. You got some really good teams, some really bad teams. So this is a very interesting one fantasy-wise.
It's kind of always been like that, too. Like, the Browns have always been pretty bad, and they're probably going to be bad again. And there's actually really intense rivalries, too, like the Steelers versus the Ravens, the Steelers versus the Bengals, in real football, not in really fantasy, but always tough rivalries in this division. Rob, what do you think of this division?
It's like jam-packed full of players, and it's going to be a hot one. And it's...
Yeah.
I would look out for this league.
Awesome.
Oh, boy.
Awesome take. Anyway, let's just get into the hottest team in that division last year. You see that segue? That's freaking good.
Oh,
the
professional segue.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, but now it's ruined by you saying that.
No, it's
professional segue.
Put it in there.
Only the best for the listeners.
Yeah. The hottest team in that division last year, the Pittsburgh Steelers, came in first in that division, led by quarterback Ben Roethlisberger, old Benny. He's getting a little up there in age. Sean, what are you thinking of him this year? Where are you taking him, if at all?
I think the consensus I'm getting from people I've talked to is that people are in... Very rarely do people agree on one player in fantasy, but people are in a general consensus that this guy is going to be a bust. He's overrated.
Yeah.
Almost to the fact where I think he's being slightly underrated. Still, he's a very borderline QB1 for me, and he's very inconsistent, always injured, really hurtling towards the end of his career, and that kind of negates the fact that he's got the best wide receiver running back tandem to play with in the league.
Yeah, I mean, he has Le'Veon Bell he's handing it off to and passing to, who is the second best wide receiver on that team besides behind Antonio Brown, of course. But he does have Martavis Bryant back this year. So in 2015, Martavis Bryant had some huge value. In 2016, he was out all year. So having him back could could definitely help him, but I agree. The consensus is that he's going to be a bust this year. If you take into consideration the seasons that he's finished in the top 10 in fantasy quarterbacks, it's only been three seasons in the last 10 years or something like that. So
wow,
he's not really a quarterback one, to be honest. I think he's getting drafted kind of where he should, like in the fringe of the quarterback starter, rankings.
Yeah, I think if you're going to pick a quarterback 2 and play matchups, he's not a bad guy to have because he does get to play the Browns and possibly the Bengals, who might be really bad, twice each this year. So, that's an upside pick there. And, again, you're not going to get consistency, so don't bank on him being your starter. And I know Rob is not a fan of this guy. Rob has a bone to pick with Ben.
Yeah, he's a big guy, and he's also a big idiot.
Thanks for that.
Yep.
Yeah. But one strategy to keep in mind with Big Ben, if you're going to draft him as your potential starter, you need to draft a quarterback like right around there. So maybe a Marcus Mariota, a Jameis Winston type, a Kirk Cousins, where you can get those guys late. You definitely have to pair Big Ben with one of those quarterbacks so you can play the matchup game, because you can't bank on Ben for 16 games this year. I think we could agree on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now moving along to one of the best fantasy players and one of the most reliable ones, Le'Veon Bell, running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Gotta love this guy.
This guy is unreal. First off,
freak.
Just on a side note, one of the most fun players to watch in the league. This guy caught 75 passes last year in 12 games as a running back. That is unheard of. I think David Johnson had something like 79 catches, the guy that he gets compared to a lot. That's in 4 full more games than Bell played. Bell, to me, is the slight favorite as the number 1 pick. This guy is just an absolute beast. He's going to get it done on a weekly basis. I don't think he had a single game under 10 fantasy points standard last year, which is phenomenal. And again, you can count on this guy. He's had freak injuries in the past. He tore his ACL a couple of years ago, but the suspensions of the last couple of years have actually kept him kind of fresh and kept him ready to go every week. So I love this guy as my RB1 overall number 1 player.
Yeah, you really can't go wrong with him or David Johnson as your number 1 overall, and whoever takes one of those number 1, the other guy is going to go number 2. I think David Johnson has a slight advantage. I mean, it's pennies at that point. Le'Veon was their second best wide receiver. I mean, second best receiver last year. I think that's going to continue. Martavis Bryant is obviously back, but he's going to catch a ton of balls. He'll be a top 3 running back this year, so you can't really go wrong with him. One guy to mention is James Conner. He is the backup behind Le'Veon Bell. I don't think you need to draft James Conner necessarily as a handcuff. That's a big strategy with big running backs, and to handcuff them with their backup. I don't think you need to draft him, but I think you do need to be on the lookout for James Conner.
Well, before we get into James Conner, I just want to say Le'Veon Bell, more like let me on Bell. Let freedom ring. This guy is killing it. He's top 2 player when he's healthy and not suspended, but I'm bullish on Bell. Just wanted to put my input in there.
Oh my God. But wait, before we move on, I just want to add something quick to what Scott was saying about handcuffs, because this is such a hot button topic for a lot of fantasy owners. I tend to agree with you in like a 10-man league that I wouldn't necessarily draft James Conner as a handcuff, but if I'm in a league that's any deeper than that, if I'm in a 12-man, 14-man, maybe even deeper, I'm absolutely taking James Conner and putting him on my bench if I own Le'Veon Bell, because if I lose him, you can't lose all of that value. Obviously, you're not going to get it all back with James Conner, but maybe he comes in and he's like a reliable RB2, maybe a high-end flex. At least you're getting that back if Bell goes down. Obviously, it's not going to be good, period, if Bell goes down. But in a deep league, I would suggest handcuffing, especially a guy as valuable as Bell.
Yeah, that's a great point. You got to keep in mind you're going to have this is very obvious, but you're going to have less good players on your team with a 12 or 14 team league. So you do need to cover all your bases there. So in a deeper league, we would suggest handcuffing James Conner, maybe with your last pick, honestly, or second to last pick. But 10 team leagues, just be on the lookout for him. In case you hear about any injuries or whatever, just snatch him up on the waiver wire. Moving along to the number 1 consensus wide receiver. This team is stacked with number 1 players. Antonio Brown is pretty much the third or fourth overall guy in fantasy this year, and I think that's right where he should go. He's been a freak the past 3 or 4 years, especially when Big Ben is healthy, but I think that's going to continue. And he's only going to get helped by Martavis Bryant coming back from suspension all year last year.
Yeah, I think this guy shouldn't go outside the top 4 total of any draft. Shout out real quick to our league mate in one of our leagues, Alex Damala, for getting him at pick number 5, which I consider a steal, and then immediately screwing up by drafting Zeke in the second round, but we're going to leave that out. AB is an absolute stud. This guy he may not finish the season as the number 1 overall wide receiver, but he's not finishing outside the top 3. You don't have a lot of risk here. He's just a game in, game out gamer. He gets it done. This guy is phenomenal. And I agree with you. I think Bryant, I love this year. Bryant, to me, I rate him even higher than you. I see him as like a low-end wide receiver 2 with high-end wide receiver 2 upside. This guy is absolutely unreal. He's obviously in and out of the lineup, but so much potential here.
Well, let's just talk about his 2015 season. Martavis Bryant. So Antonio Brown's going to be a top 3 wide receiver. We know that. Martavis Bryant was a freak 2 years ago. He was suspended all last year, but when he was on the field, the amount of touchdowns he got per reception was unsustainable. And what I mean by that is he didn't get a ton of catches and touches to warrant getting 8 touchdowns, which is what he got. So that's not as sustainable, but he is a huge deep threat. So definitely high upside there. He's getting drafted as a wide receiver 3, so basically your third best wide receiver. I think that's about right, but huge upside there, especially as the number 2 guy with Antonio Brown getting so much attention.
Yeah, I agree.
And then one guy to keep in mind is Eli Rogers. If any of those 2 go down, Eli Rogers should step in and probably not produce the same numbers, but be a viable bye-week fill-in for you. Any other wide receivers? I think that's pretty much it. Those 3 are the main guys.
Sammy Coates is a big name last year, but he showed that he's really not a good. He's not ready.
Reliable.
He's not ready yet to be a guy that you're going to count on in fantasy. I think Eli Rogers is sneaky because he is a guy that plays in the slot, which obviously Brown does a little bit, but he actually kind of completes the offense on the inside, which is really nice.
Yeah, and one other guy is Juju Smith-Schuster. Schuster, right? He's a rookie. That's another name to be on the lookout for in case Eli Rogers falters. Juju Smith, best top 10 name, but could be a guy there that has some value. One position that doesn't have a ton of value there, Heath Miller obviously did back in the day. Jesse James is the new tight end there. Pretty much the same as Heath Miller, a little bit worse, I would say. Not really fantasy relevant. Yeah. He just catches a lot of short balls from Big Ben, so nothing to really see there, I don't think.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. I'm going to jump right into my my sleeper and my bust here. I think my biggest sleeper is the guy we just talked about, Martavis Bryant. I think this guy is lights out when he's on the field. He's somebody that really, if you draft him as your third best wide receiver, which is where he's going, you could be very excited about that pick. For my bust, we talked about him to start, Big Ben. Not going to add too much. I'm a little wary of him. This team overall is really good. I think I'm looking at like 11-5, maybe 12-4 season. They're a very, very good team.
Yeah, I would say I agree with you. Biggest surprise is probably Martavis Bryant. Or you could make an argument for James Conner if Le'Veon Bell continues holding out. Yeah. Maybe James Conner will have some value in the first couple of weeks if Le'Veon doesn't play for whatever reason. Biggest bust, I think, is also Big Ben. You could also make the argument, though, Antonio Brown could be a big bust, or Le'Veon, because they're getting drafted so high up that they could, might not meet those expectations, even though I think they will. And I think 11-5 is a pretty accurate record for this team. They're always pretty good under Mike Tomlin.
Yeah, I just got to say before we wrap it up, my sleeper is going to be Jesse James, obviously, because the All-American outlaw, bank and train robber, guerrilla, gang leader, and murderer, hailing from the Little Dixie area of western Missouri.
Did you look that up?
He's one of the most famous members of the James Young gang. It's Jesse James. Everybody knows Jesse
history
James.
Buff. Rob's a big history buff.
I think he's just got tactics out the wazoo, obviously. If you look at his resume, he's got tactics.
Yeah, but did you look up his Wikipedia page and look up, did you just read off that shit?
No, it's just one of those things I know, and I rehearsed an intro for him.
Really cool. Really cool.
Rob loves a good outlaw.
Yeah. The James Young gang. Watch out. This episode of Unqualified is sponsored by Uber. I take Uber down to the grocery store and to the cafe by my farm because it's a cheap and affordable way to take a car. If you don't have a car, you could take a Uber. You could take a Uber to your friend's house because I said to Mom that my friend lives very far away, so I use my phone to take my Uber to my friend's house. It's $2 Uber. To be clear, that sponsor is Uber. That wasn't. We gotta hire somebody else for that.
All right, moving along to the Baltimore Ravens, big rival of the Pittsburgh Steelers. The quarterback position, Joe Flacco, a little noteworthy. He's never really been fantasy relevant, to be honest, but he was injured in training camp, and all reports out of that camp look like he'll be good for September 10th against the Cincinnati Bengals, which is their regular season opener. But what do you think of fantasy value for Joe Flacco, considering if he is good by week 1?
It's a little interesting. His game is just, this guy's got a huge arm. He's really good at throwing the ball deep, but yet he's still not fantasy relevant every year, which is kind of perplexing to me. I really like him as a player, as the general of that team. I don't think he has nearly enough weapons around him. And he is, again, like I mentioned, he doesn't really throw the ball down the field enough and with enough consistency to be, even a fantasy number 2. I think he's more of a bye week fill-in.
Yeah, at the very best bye week fill-in. If he is injured by week 1, Ryan Mallett is the guy there, is the quarterback.
Oh, God.
That's definitely noteworthy in case Flacco is out for any portion of the season, because Ryan Mallett can definitely not get the ball to those wide receivers, Jeremy Maclin, Mike Wallace, Rashad Perryman. So that's something to keep in mind. Like, those guys are definitely not going to have as much value as they would with Flacco.
Yeah.
One thing about Flacco to keep in mind is that now he has Danny Woodhead to dump it off to. So he could have some sneakier value than you think as a bye week fill-in, but not much in terms of fantasy there. Running back situation is a little more interesting. So Danny Woodhead is now on that team, like I said. They also have Terrence West, who used to be on the Browns. He was kind of a journeyman. I think Terrence West is going to have the most value there, but Danny Woodhead in PPR, points per reception leagues, is going to have huge value. I just don't think in standard leagues. I think he's getting way too much love. He's going way too early for me. I'm staying away from Woodhead. Terrence West, I'll take a flyer on in round like 10 or 12.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think Woodhead's going about like 48th, so right now in ADP.
Just crazy.
It's about the 5th round. You're taking him as your locked-in flex or RB2. I don't see it. I think in PPR, that's fine. In PPR, he's a really, really good flex. He's a solid RB2, but people are going crazy about him. Obviously, he's had some really good years. He's a very, very good actual football player, don't get me wrong, but you don't want to count on this guy week to week as one of your top 5 players on your team. I don't know if I can stomach that. West, I do really like, especially because Kenneth Dixon got hurt. Kenneth Dixon is a guy that has a ton of upside later down the road in the coming years, but right now Terrence West might be the guy this year, and he's a very, very sneaky player this year in fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, West is going to get all the in-between the tackles. He'll probably be the first and second down back, so he'll probably get the goal line carries. Like, Woodhead's not going to really get those. He will catch a ton of passes. I can see Woodhead, if he stays healthy, which is a problem for him, catching 70 to 80 balls, but that's a big if. And in standard leagues, I would stay away from Woodhead. Like, for example, one quick thing, for example, in our draft, he fell to like 80 overall. At that point, it's not bad value because you got him so later than he's supposed to be, but I would still stay away from him. Wide receiver is a bit of a logjam, and it got interesting this offseason. So they just signed Jeremy Maclin this offseason, longtime longtime Philadelphia Eagle, and they've had Mike Wallace for a while, and Rashad Perryman as well. I don't know what to make of it, but what do you think?
I mean, before they picked up Maclin, I was a huge Rashad Perryman believer. I think this guy is going to be a star sooner rather than later, but the fact that they went to get Macklin just kind of shows that he's not ready to me. I think they kind of, showed their hand a little bit and said, okay, this guy's not quite ready to be our wide receiver 1, so let's go and get ourselves one. I think Macklin could be pretty good this year. I can't see him being anything more than like a good flex guy, but he can do he could do a lot worse at the wide receiver position. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think all these guys are getting drafted around the same area. Definitely Macklin and Wallace. They're going, 115 overall. Rashad Perryman's barely getting drafted. He has the most upside because he's the freakiest athlete to me.
Yes.
Macklin, he's a proven wide receiver, but in Philly, in Kansas City, he never really had 1,000-yard campaigns and double-digit touchdowns. So his upside is pretty limited. Mike Wallace is the interesting guy because he's all reliable. He's on the Steelers, on the Dolphins. In, I think, out of the last 6 years, 5 of those years, he's been in the top 25 of wide receivers for fantasy points. So he's pretty reliable there, to be honest. And I think that's going to stay the same. So that's one guy, if you need a safety valve at wide receiver, take a hard look at Mike Wallace. Rashad Perryman, if you want a big upside pick there, take him late.
Yeah, like I mentioned with Flacco, Flacco's really good at throwing the ball really deep down the field. What does Mike Wallace do better than anybody else in the league, except for a handful of guys? Run down the field really fast and catch the ball, So he's a guy that is a very unsexy pick, but he just might be the guy that you fit into your lineup every week and, it helps you out.
Yeah, absolutely. Tight end position, so they lost Dennis Pitta to retirement, actually. He caught a ton of passes last year, but now they've replaced him with Ben Watson, who's even older, and Max Williams, the draft pick a couple of years ago. It's kind of a logjam here. I don't think there's too much fantasy value. I think these two are just going to vulture from each other, to be honest, so I would probably stay away from both of them.
Yeah, Flacco loved Pitta last year, and he was still barely a tight end 1, so I wouldn't go crazy about either of these guys.
Yeah.
I could use a bowl of Macklin cheese.
Wow.
But I don't know if I have enough money in my Mike Wallace.
That's actually pretty good. You don't even write that one down. That was pretty good. Nice.
Might wash it down with a good Perryman.
Oh, Perrier, Perrier.
Jeez, he's still going.
Anything else? No.
If I was in the dark, I would probably use a light bulb with a lot of Watson.
Ben Watt, you're on fire, straight fire.
Yeah, he's used
right
like every player here. Oh my god.
Yeah, wow. This is a good food team, I guess. Anyway.
Well, I am an expert.
Oh my god.
Ooh,
did you get that one?
It was good,
no,
but
I didn't get that one.
Not your best.
Anyway, let's move on to our surprises.
You were on a roll. You might have cooled off a little bit.
Yeah,
I'm embarrassed. I think I gotta go.
Anyway, biggest surprises for this team. I think honestly, it could be Rashad Perryman. He's just not getting drafted, so your expectations for him are pretty tempered. The biggest bust potential is Danny Woodhead, just in terms of where he's getting drafted. I think it's ridiculous how early he's getting drafted. And I think this team is a very middling team. I think they'll be 8-8 this year.
I love the Perryman pick. I'll just add Terrence West just for a little bit of variety. I think this guy is getting overlooked this year, and running back is a scarcity. This guy is probably going to handle most of the short yardage and early down work, so definitely take a flyer on him late. Biggest bust, I agree. I think, I hate to say it, but Woodhead is a great NFL player. He's not nearly good enough fantasy player to get drafted where he's currently getting drafted, so unless that changes between now and your draft, he's someone that I'd probably avoid. I kind of agree. I think this team, it really depends on how the rest of the division goes. I don't see the Bengals being that good this year. I don't see the Browns being that good this year either. So I think the Ravens could end up at, somewhere at 9-7, squeaking into the last wild card spot in the playoffs. But I think that's pretty much their ceiling as an NFL team.
The max, if you will.
Exactly.
Oh, the Max Williams.
This episode of Unqualified is sponsored by Jonathan. Jonathan is super rich and super cool. And she wanted to sponsor an episode by herself because she wanted to hear her name on the radio, on the internet radio podcast. So Janice is giving us hey, I'm Janice. Once again, where the fuck are we getting these people? Seriously.
All right, moving along to the Cincinnati Bengals. So we got Andy Dalton, Red Rocket, as their quarterback. Pretty much always been a a quarterback 2 / bye week fill-in guy. He has had, honestly, with him, he's had up and down years. So whenever he has a good year in fantasy-wise, the next year he kind of sucks. Last year he sucked, so this year he might be good. What do we think?
Yeah, I think losing Hugh Jackson last year, Hugh Jackson left to coach the Browns. I think that was a huge hit for Dalton's value.
Yeah.
I think with a little bit of consistency in the offensive regime, we might see a little bit of a bounce back. I agree. I think he's been super up and down, but he has always had AJ Green to throw to. So this guy is always going to have some value. I see him kind of in the Eli Manning, Phillip Rivers territory with probably a little bit more upside. Just because he's a little bit younger and is a little bit more careful with the ball than those guys. So someone that maybe is you're looking at if you miss out on the guys that you want to pair with your good quarterback, Dalton's a guy I would take a look at definitely.
You also don't need to draft him, so he can be a waiver wire guy at the end of your draft. If you don't like someone, you can pick him up in replacing. Also, one quick thing to mention: he's always had AJ Green, but they did a lot in the draft for him. They drafted Joe Mixon, who we'll get to in a second, and also John Ross in the first round. And John Ross is going to blow the top off of defenses, so that should help both AJ Green and Dalton in terms of value. But again, QB2 in a 2 QB league, I would definitely take Dalton as a second quarterback and feel pretty good.
Yes.
Running back situation here. So Joe Mixon, like we mentioned, second round pick in the draft for the Cincinnati Bengals. Looks like he's the favorite to be the starter. He has Jeremy Hill and Giovanni Bernard behind him, who have been the longtime starters there for past couple of years, and they just haven't gotten it done, to be honest. I think Mixon has a good blend of Jeremy Hill's power running and Bernard's speed there, and offers the most versatility for sure for them.
Yeah, I think Mixon's a guy that, eventually in his career and probably off the start is going to be a 3-down player, which is huge in fantasy football. There's not a ton of these guys out there. So having a guy that has all the tools is definitely a good sign. I will say that for some reason, I actually think the Bengals are still a little bit committed to Jeremy Hill, which I don't understand personally.
I don't get that either.
So, Hill might open the season as a starter, but I don't think it'll be long before Mixon takes a job over. I think you're looking at probably, high-end flex potential, or if, Hill goes down or eventually loses the job, I think you're looking at a pretty solid RB2 with obviously a lot of upside. This offense has been pretty significantly consistent, over the past couple of years, so even with Dalton going up and down, the offense as a whole has been pretty good. So Mixon could really, fit right in here and be a nice player.
Yeah,
I think he's going to mix in well.
Nice. I see what you did there. Any more puns before I get into the fantasy?
Yeah, let me take a look here. Well, Jeremy's over the hill.
I agree.
Yeah, we agree with that.
And Giovanni Bernard is probably Italian.
Has a weird name. No, he's actually... Well, I actually don't know if he is or not. Maybe he is. One thing to mention about this situation, we talked about handcuffing running backs when we were talking about the Steelers. This running back situation in Cincinnati is a perfect example of handcuffing, although it's very difficult to figure this out. So, first of all, I want to shout out friend of the pod, Josh DeLeon.
Josh!
Yeah, what's up, Joshy? Big, huge Cincinnati Bengals fan. We don't love them this year, Josh. Sorry, but we're still shouting you out, so be happy. But to me, this situation is going to break down as Joe Mixon is the starter eventually. Jeremy Hill is going to start on that team in the beginning, but Joe Mixon is going to take over as the main guy there. I think if you draft Joe Mixon like I did in our league, you might want to think about Jeremy Hill in round 12 or 13. That's a strategy because you're basically getting all the production from that backfield.
Yeah, I'll say the downside to that is, obviously I think Mixon has a lot more potential overall than both of the other guys. I've actually owned both Jeremy Hill and Giovanni Bernard on the same team in the past, and it's infuriating because you have basically two guys that you don't feel very confident playing. So you're kind of wasting 2 roster spots on guys that are probably flex-worthy at best. So I think Mixon going there is really the Bengals saying, we need to shake this up a little bit. So I think it's a really good choice for them, and it could be a really good choice for your fantasy team this year.
Now that I'm thinking about it, it's actually not a handcuff situation in this team. It's actually it's like a 3-headed backfield, which is a lot different. So handcuffs, like James Conner with the Pittsburgh Steelers, is if the main guy gets hurt, the handcuff is going to take over that backfield by himself.
Yes.
A three-headed committee like this is, you're like you said, you've had Jeremy Hill and Giovanni Bernard on the same team once before, and they just vulture from each other, meaning Bernard's is going to be on the field when Hill's not, and then Hill's going to get a touchdown when you want Bernard to get one. So you can't you can't figure out which one to play in any given week. So in a situation like this, it's probably best to take the one with the least amount of risk, which is probably Joe Mixon at this point. We already know what Hill and Bernard could do. Yep. And they've been low-end running back 2 at best. So Mixon, that's his floor. His upside is potentially a running back 1. And where he's going, like 50th, 60th overall, is pretty good value for that potential.
Yeah, and I think this team is always going to be A.J. Green's. It's going to revolve around A.J. Green. So I think obviously Mixon could really fit in well and be a guy that they can build the offense around. We know for a fact that Hill and Bernard are not the guy that they're going to build the whole offense around. So definitely keep that in mind too.
Yeah, let's talk about A.J. Green because he's going in the first round pretty much. He's a top end wide receiver, always pretty much has been in his career. He was a little hurt last year, but he's a freak athlete. He'll be a top 5 wide receiver as usual.
You know why?
The best value is why?
Because he eats his greens.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. The best thing that happened to him, though, is that they drafted John Ross in the first round, who I don't think will have any value, but it's going to take a lot of pressure off of Green and only help.
Yeah, one thing that I'm thinking of when I'm drafting players, especially early in the draft, rounds 1, 2, and maybe 3, I like to think about how scared I am to own the guy and how scared I am to play against the guy. AJ Green is a guy that when I play against him every season, I am terrified because this guy is so good. As long as he's on the field, he's going to be putting up points for you. He's someone that I agree with you completely. He's going to be a top 5 wide receiver this year. I think he's getting somehow a little bit overlooked, even though he's going at the end of the first round. I feel like he's doing it very quietly. People are just going, oh yeah, there's AJ Green. Get excited about this guy. He's phenomenal. And he eats his greens.
Get excited about him. Get riled up. Start running around and yelling in the streets.
For the whole world.
Get excited about him.
Get
excited, Scott.
I'm excited about it.
Let's
All right,
go.
I'm excited.
Get right now.
One quick guy I want to mention because we need to move on to tight end, but Tyler Boyd is their slot guy, who's a second-round pick last year. So he didn't do much as a rookie, but if that offense hums like it's supposed to, with John Ross as the deep threat, AJ Green is the every down wide receiver, Tyler Boyd could have some sneaky value if Andy Dalton has a season like he should have with all those new weapons.
Yeah, I think I think John Ross, people are going to go crazy about him this year just because he's immensely talented. He's probably the fastest guy to enter the NFL. I think he ran a 4.22 in the combine, which is unreal.
I think, yeah.
However, I think he might have a little bit of growing pains at the next level. I mean, I hope he doesn't. He's a joy. He was a joy to watch at Washington in college, and I hope he just translates seamlessly to the NFL. But I think Tyler Boyd having that year under his belt, his rookie year was last year, I think that's really going to help him this year. I think he could be a guy that, plays with a little bit of savvy on the inside and, really carves out a role for himself this year.
Yeah, another guy on the inside is Tyler Eifert, who was pretty much hurt all of last year. So now Andy Dalton's getting him back. I think he's a solid tight end 1. I think back end tight end 1, but I would draft him, around 9 or 10 and feel pretty good about it. He's a touchdown dependent tight end, but still, that's pretty good in the tight end position in fantasy.
Yeah, I think in the range that he's going, I think he's clearly the guy with the most upside. I think when he's healthy, he has top 5 tight end potential. Obviously, his issue is injuries, but at that point in the draft, that point with tight ends, you really need, if you have C upside there, you got to take it. So I think he's the guy, a guy that I'd be pretty comfortable with as my tight end 1. And if he goes down, I just pick up a random, touchdown dependent tight end 2, and I, deal with it.
Yeah, and if you have stacked running backs and wide receivers, you can also take a second tight end like a Jack Doyle in the much later than Tyler Eifert and pair the two of them. That's not a bad strategy. For this team, surprise, it's got to be Joe Mixon for me. He's not a lock to even be the starter on that team as of now, but the most upside, the most athleticism for sure. Biggest bust potential, honestly, I'm going to go with Tyler Eifert. I know we were just talking about him, but he's had last year, even when he was on the field, he wasn't that effective. So where he's getting drafted as a top tight end, I I could see him ending as like tight end number 11 or 12, which is kind of a bust, quote unquote, in terms of where he's getting drafted. So that's a small bust there. But then this team, I could see them going 6-10, and I think they're due for a downgrade, 6-10 or 5-11. Sorry, Josh.
Oh man, that's harsh for your buddy. I think my biggest surprise, I think John Ross could be huge this year. I know I just mentioned he might have a little bit of growing pains, but I think this guy is more than just a really fast receiver. I think he's got a lot of different skills in his game. He's someone that I'm definitely excited. I'm keeping an eye on him. Maybe not drafting him, but maybe if he's out there on the waiver wire, I keep my eye on him and see what he's up to week in and week out. As far as my biggest bust potential is going to hurt you. I know you already own him in one of our leagues, Joe Mixon. I think he's going pretty high, and if he doesn't seize that job like we think he's going to, then if you draft him in the top 60, 70 picks, it's a little bit of a bust because you're kind of counting on him to get a ton of touches there. So definitely something to keep in mind. Just kind of proceed with caution there. Make sure you keep up to date on the news with this team. I agree with you. I think they're probably like a 6-10, 7-9 team. I think they'll be right around the playoff picture and probably fall off later in the year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say I'm a big fan of Green because of the food name, and as far as Tyler goes, I've heard he's great. This episode of Unqualified is sponsored by Joey. I sponsored this podcast episode because I got a great idea for something that's going to change your life. Bagels with raisins inside of them. I'm going to say it one more time. Bagels with raisins inside of them. Have you heard an idea like that yet? Because I think I'm pretty revolutionary. Okay, that is enough! That's enough! This show has gone off the rails. I mean, who is in charge of hiring the talent? We've got a 3-man team here. It's hard enough as it is.
All right, let's move along to the last team in the AFC North, the Cleveland Browns. Not a lot going on for this team besides running back and wide receiver, so we'll just gloss over the quarterback. It's kind of a mess. They traded for Brock Osweiler. He looks like he's going to be the starter week 1, but no fantasy value. Cody Kessler's the backup. Long-term, Deshaun Kaiser, their draft pick out of Notre Dame, might be the starter, but probably in like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I think Kaiser easily could win the job this year just based on the fact that he has nothing around him. I don't think Brock Osweiler will hold on to that job if he does start the season with it. So, I'm not sure what that does for the rest of the guys on this team, but not looking very good at the quarterback situation this year.
Yeah, the position that's really interesting to me is the running back position. So Isaiah Crowell is back as a starter. They also have Duke Johnson as the backup / pass-catching back. Isaiah Crowell, he's getting drafted very early in fantasy drafts, around 30th overall, so your third or fourth best player. I feel great about that, though. He's running behind a very good offensive line that got even better in the offseason. They got a couple of pieces to that line. And their coach, Hugh Jackson, straight up said they need to get him the ball more. I think he only carried it 198 times last year, which is still good, but he returned top 20 or top 14 running back stats with those little carries. So he's going to get even more. He'll probably get 300 carries this year, and he could vault in the top 10 easily.
Yeah, I mean, I like the potential, especially going behind that offensive line that's vastly improved from last year. And I think he's definitely a nice RB2 candidate. My issue with him is this team is just not going to be that good. They're going to be better than they were last year, but they're still not going to be a very good team. So he scares me a little bit if I'm counting on him as like a high-end RB2 or a low-end 1. I think I see him more as like a mid-tier 2 just because that team is not going to be that good, and he doesn't offer a ton of value catching the ball, which they're going to need to throw the ball a lot.
Yeah, the thing I'm looking at is the defense got so much better. So they had the first overall pick with Myles Garrett. They shored up the backfield in their defense with Jabril Peppers, right, out of Michigan. So he's their safety now. So that defense is light years better already. And their offensive line got better. So they're going to look to stop teams and then run it and run the clock out. They're not going to have a lot going on with Brock Osweiler throwing it.
Yeah, I agree.
And yes, Duke Johnson is going to be the pass catching running back there. But I'm not sold on his talent level. I think Kroll is the main first and second down back. And
not sold on his talent level. Oh my God, that is harsh. That is harsh.
It's not harsh. Duke Johnson sucks. I had him last year. He sucks.
I mean, I don't think you can really judge Duke Johnson based off what he's
What
had
have we
going
been
for him
talking
so
about for the
far.
past 10 podcasts about talent level and their ability to produce? He sucks. He's not going to produce. You heard it here. He sucks.
I think on
Don't
a better
draft
team,
Duke
Duke Johnson would be a
Hot take,
nice
he
weapon. But I think, obviously whatever quarterback they go with isn't going to be a guy that probably utilizes Duke Johnson correctly anyway. So I'm not super high on him either. I think Crowell, again, I'm still a little bit shaky on, but I think obviously the upside is there. I think too many people now are realizing this, and he's kind of a trendy pick. Might be getting a little bit overdrafted. For me personally, I think.
Yeah, a little bit.
I don't like a Cleveland Browns player being one of my top 5 players personally. That's just all I have to say about it.
Fair enough. Wide receiver. Let's move on to that position. Kenny Britt is their kind of de facto number 1 guy. They still have Corey Coleman from last year. We saw Terrell Pryor had a ton of value as their number 1 guy because they were throwing it a lot. Kenny Britt, I can't see him slipping into that role. I could see Corey Coleman having some sneaky value late in drafts. I think he could be, he could provide some wide receiver 3 value there, or numbers at least.
Yeah, I think with Britt, we saw him put up a really good season with Case Keenum and Jared Goff as his quarterback. So obviously he's actually getting probably a little bit worse this year. We'll see how it goes, but he's someone that could have sneaky flex value, but again, I'm not very excited about him. If I'm counting on him as a wide receiver 3 or 4, I don't think it's going to happen for him. Coleman has a ton of talent. First round pick 2 years ago or last year, and this guy had some really great games last year. Obviously, it wasn't consistent, but this guy definitely has the upside. He's definitely worth a late round flyer.
Yeah. Tight end. We want to talk about that quickly. It's David Joku. I don't even know how to say his last name, but not too much fantasy value for tight end there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's a pretty exciting rookie coming in. I think, especially in dynasty leagues, he's definitely a name to keep an eye on. He's someone that has a ton of talent. He just really needs to start developing chemistry with the quarterback, and I don't think they even know who the quarterback's going to be week 1. So it's really tough to trust a Browns receiver, especially one that's a rookie. So I think I'm kind of staying away from him this year, but years down the line, he's someone that I'm definitely keeping my eye on.
Yeah, and in terms of sleepers for this team, I think Corey Coleman is the biggest sleeper. The biggest bust potential is probably Isaiah Crowell, just in terms of where he's getting drafted, because he's getting drafted so early now. This team is probably going to be 4-12. I could see them getting 3 more wins than last year, but nothing to write home about.
Yeah, I think you grab yourself a couple of Brocks, some Kaisers, a Coleman, and you could have yourself a pretty nice barbecue. That's Njoku. That's no joke.
Oh man, wow, he's been working on that the entire segment.
Yeah, you've been thinking about that for a while.
I've been waiting to say that. I've been waiting to say that for the past 10 minutes.
I don't think I have anything to add to your sleeper bust and record. It's pretty much par for the course for me. I think, again, Coleman, I think Crowell is huge bust potential this year, especially because now he's getting drafted probably a little higher than he should. And then I agree, 4-12. I think one thing to keep in mind really quick, people are going to hate on me for being a Josh Gordon apologist, but this guy is going to have to apply for reinstatement again this fall. He's got it denied in May. If he does get reinstated, keep this guy on your watch list because he is maybe a top 10 talent.
That is a joke. I'm
not talking about fantasy. I'm talking about talent. Can you let me make my point here, and then you could rebut over there? Come on.
Okay, yeah, I will.
If he does get reinstated, and he can, obviously they get the quarterback situation figured out. 2 big ifs, obviously. Keep an eye on this guy because as far as talent goes, I don't think there's 10 more talented wide receivers in the NFL now. So obviously a lot of roadblocks in the way, but this guy can win you your league if he's on the field for you.
That's the biggest if ever, but okay, yeah.
You're welcome, listeners, when Josh Gordon wins you your league this year.
Got a little awkward there for a second. I don't have any more puns. Did you guys hear that? It sounds like it's like a UFO going overhead.
It's upstairs.
Oh.
All right, so that wraps it up for the AFC North. Again, up and down division, these teams have pretty intense rivalries, but fantasy value-wise, it's pretty much the Pittsburgh Steelers. There's a little bit with the Ravens and Bengals. Browns is pretty much nothing. Next pod, we're going to be talking about the NFC North, the other North.
Ooh, another chilly division.
Another
NFC
one.
North.
Exactly. Get those gloves out.
Get the Under Armours out. Get the gloves. Get the balaclava.
Hand warmers. Hand warmers.
What do you call that thing that you put on your face? Is it a baklava or a balaclava?
Like
Baklava?
I know one of them is something different.
thing that robbers use when they're robbing banks.
Yes, that.
Baba Ganoush.
Like a ski mask.
Jesse
a ski
James?
mask.
Yes,
You mean.
break out the baba ganoush.
No, that's not Baba Ganoush.
I know.
Anyways,
Break it out.
thank you guys for listening. Before we go, make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at UnqualifiedFF.
Yes,
That's our handle. And if you can, leave us a review on iTunes, because every review we get on iTunes helps the show become more visible to people. We get more listeners, and it helps us not look like a sketchy, no-name piece of shit.
Well put.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
So,
see you later.
Well, big gulps, huh?
Well, see you later.